Party Convention 2026. All right. I heard you guys are excited. All right. It's great to see you guys here. And, tonight is about connecting, relaxing a bit. Tomorrow's all business, so tomorrow's a different story. But we'll be taking up, business, platform proposals, bylaw amendments, delegate selection. It's going to be a full day. If you guys ever saw the stream in the past or attended a convention, these go 8, 9, 10 hours sometimes, so get ready. But tonight, a great opportunity to hear from someone who spent years digging into issues that don't always get attention they deserve and bringing them to a wider audience. Scott Horton, longtime journalist, author, host of the Scott Horton Show. Anybody correct me if I get anything wrong here, where he's conducted thousands of interviews on foreign policy, war, and civil liberties. He's known for taking complex issues, breaking them down in a way that's clear, direct, and grounded in principle. And we're glad to have him here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Scott Horton.
Check. Hey, thanks for having me. I was looking for bears. I usually am not where bears are, so I'm going to keep my eye out here in my peripheral vision. I'll let y'all know if I see.
We had a porcupine last year.
Okay. Symbolic. All right, so look, thanks for having me here. Thanks for being anti-government types. Makes you easy to get along with for me. The subject tonight, of course, is the war in Iran and America's relationship with Israel. Actually, there's ways to say the same thing. So I should consult my notes and see how I thought I wanted to start this earlier. Bears. I covered that. Okay. Yes. Skip straight to the war. That was what I was going to do. So,
That's what you said.
the war itself, as you guys probably already understand, preaching the choir kind of thing, it's just on the face of it, it's the most obvious thing that is based on lies, completely false pretext. Begun with a sneak attack, slaughtered hundreds of little children in the middle of negotiations on behalf of a treacherous third nation that doesn't give a damn about what happens to our country either way, and has already led to total catastrophe, and already has the president locked in his own stupid prison, where the only way out is to admit that he lost and leave, and so he won't, and so we're stuck. But what a disaster. A war so stupid and horrible and wrong that George W. Bush said, no, I'm not doing that. And here we are in it. And, not to be like moralistic or sensationalistic about it or whatever, but I just think it has to be crucial to understanding the other side's point of view here. When we talk about in this sneak attack that America launched to begin this war, which Trump himself compared to Pearl Harbor in a slightly different context. They slaughtered a school full of little girls, 175 of them. Of course, that's more than total people killed in the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, which never mind the fact that McVeigh had friends, and that's a whole different story. But the victim count there, let me tell you something, especially for you younger guys, that was 9/11, before 9/11. It was the worst slaughter since Second Wounded Knee. And it was like 20-something, I think 25 kids killed in the daycare center there of the federal employees. And it was, god dang, it was the worst catastrophe. I mean, man, it was something. Well, what about an Oklahoma City federal building full of just children? Just little girls, 175 were killed in the sneak attack. So think about, with our history of Pearl Harbor, and the moral of that story, the dastardly Japs and what they did to us with their treachery and their sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. What if they had hit a school full of all those American military officers' little girls and killed 175 of them? Actually, they hit another school and killed 20 more at the same time. That got less coverage. But it was shown later it was an experimental new bomb that they used. And when you think about the role that would play in our version of the story of Pearl Harbor. Oh, and then also they killed FDR that day too.
Right.
And America was a Catholic country, and he was also the Pope. That's the position that America has just put them in, just so that you might be able to put, your foot in their shoe on that context, to screw up a metaphor, and think about that from their point of view, what that means, what that says about us. A history of this country that cannot be undone. Talking about a day of infamy. Jesus Christ, what are we doing? And based on a total hoax. I mean, the Japanese made a very bad decision, but nobody's going to say that FDR wasn't sending planes to China, that FDR wasn't blockading and embargoing their oil and steel and picking that fight deliberately. As Secretary War Stimson said, we had to guarantee that the Japanese were maneuvered into firing the first shot in the war that they were planning, that they wanted. The Iranians weren't trying to pick this fight with us. Ayatollah did not want to fight the United States. His regime was not threatening the United States. His regime was not threatening Israel. So what it came down to, pretext number one, of course, is the nukes. And obviously the principle of propaganda here is just that you don't know enough about nukes, so they're going to just lie to you and scare you. What are you going to do? Study all of these isotopes and shit? No. So you're going to listen to the radio, and the radio's going to tell you whether to be afraid today or not. Bad guy's got nukes. You can tolerate a bad guy, but you can't tolerate a bad guy with nukes. And so if you say so, experts, that's step number one. And they learned that just from the focus groups really in 1990 when they were trying to figure out how to get the American people to support Iraq War I. They go, well, what if we told you that Saddam's making nukes? And actually they didn't even know they were lying at the time. He did have a nascent nuclear weapons program in 1990, which was destroyed quickly. But they didn't know they were lying. They tested that, and the focus group people started turning the needle to the right. Okay, if you're going to protect me from getting nuked in my jammies, then okay, we'll support the war. So they know that that's what it takes to get you to support it. Now, obviously, Iran does have a nuclear program, but they still don't have a nuke. And I know you've all heard, for as long as you've been alive with your various ages here, you've heard your whole life that they're making nukes, at least since the late 80s. Somebody earlier cited 1992. I think there's even a couple of cases in the mid-1980s where the Israelis, or at least some Israeli politicians, were warning that this was a rapid possibility, eventuality. And yet they don't have a single atom bomb yet. So it's 1945 technology, especially the Hiroshima bomb, a simple gun type nuke. You just shoot a uranium slug into a uranium target and it goes bang. They didn't even test that one before they nuked Hiroshima. The Trinity test was for the Nagasaki bomb, the more complicated explosion bomb. Anyway, they could have atom bombs, but they haven't made any. That's why they don't have any. And it's essentially just been propaganda this whole time. And when Donald Trump says, oh, they were 2 weeks away now, oh, come on. Like, that's hardly even a lie, right? That's just a fib. That's just stupid, dude. 2 weeks. He's the same guy who's actually not lying when he says that he obliterated their nuclear program last June. He actually did bomb the crap out of it. Now, in fact, we don't know the status of the centrifuges buried down deep beneath Fordo and Natanz. But it doesn't matter, because if anybody was working down there, they got buried alive. And all the elevator shafts and all the air vents are closed. And they're closed for business completely and permanently. And open source and classified intelligence reported in the news says that they have not even tried to reopen their enrichment facilities that were destroyed last year. So not only are they not 2 weeks away, man, Trump really did set them back maybe a decade. 8 years, 10 years. Assuming he left them alone. So, the idea that there was some imminent nuclear threat to Israel, the United States, or anyone at the time that we started this war on February 28th, come on. And I know there's only 365 days in a year, but isn't that weird that it's the anniversary of the Waco raid?
Right.
It bothers me. Anyway, they like killing kids, the federal government does. Anyway, so, it's bullshit. So what is the truth, okay? I'm not Iran's lawyer. I don't give a damn about them, and I'll be perfectly as cynical and steel man argument with you as I can on it, okay? The fact is, there's no reason for anyone to be naive or take their side. What they were doing was they were creating a latent nuclear deterrent. They were building up what's called, their position of what's called a threshold nuclear weapons state. That's the same as Germany, Brazil, and Japan. They have nuclear reactors and enrichment facilities. Everyone knows they've mastered the fuel cycle. Everybody knows they could make a nuke. They have the material and the expertise to make a nuke, but they choose not to, so don't test them. It's a half-assed nuclear weapons deterrent, okay? So here's how the standoff worked. The Israelis were saying they have a civilian nuclear program, but that's just cover for them mastering the ability to make a nuclear bomb. Get them, America, bomb them for us, okay? Then America under Bush, Obama, Trump 1, and Biden said, no, we're not going to do that. But Iran, you better not break out and try to make a nuke. Convert your civilian program to a weapons program and go for a nuke. Because if you go for a nuke, we will bomb you before you're done. So don't even try it. And then Iran's position was, hey, we're not making nukes, so don't bomb us. And then this was the unstated part. This is the part where we have to be cynical, steelman arguers here, but it's okay. But if you do bomb us, then we might. That was the latent nuclear deterrent. The thing is, so Trump called their bluff last June. He bombed the crap out of their nuclear facilities, and he gave them then an added incentive to go ahead and make a nuke now. He called their bluff. Only problem is, he called the shit out of it and bombed the shit out of it. And so, if they want to now break out toward a nuke, it's going to take a massive effort, far beyond if they had broken out to make a nuke 1 year ago before he had bombed them. He really did set them back that far. So, their bluff is called, and that's why on February 27th, the day before the war, the Ayatollah's offer in Geneva was, look, we'll suspend all uranium enrichment for 5 years. And then when we start enriching again, we'll enrich only to 1.5%. And we'll ship our entire uranium stockpile out of the country, even to the United States, to be transformed into fuel rods and sent back. Okay, in other words, Iran was climbing way down the ladder, just barely holding on to their right to enrich on like a technical basis only, a face-saving basis only, climbing way down to the bottom rung. Because in truth, Donald Trump did call their bluff last June. And the Ayatollah was no dummy. What's the point of making maximalist demands when he's got no cards to play? Trump took all his cards away. So he was giving in almost entirely. He was saying we won't enrich it all for 5 years. And when we do again, it'll be at 1.5%. That's according to the Omani negotiator that was passing the deal back and forth. The next day, Trump bombed them. I think there's every reason to believe that it was because Witkoff was becoming too successful. Witkoff was going to be able to strike a deal here. Not that they had one in hand, but yes, we absolutely have a basis to negotiate this, and we don't want a deal. That's just a pretext. We don't want to solve it, dummy. We want to bomb them. So they bombed them. They lied, pretended there's a nuclear weapons threat, because that's how you get regular people to say, hey, we can't let these guys nuke us. And there's a presumption of honor, right? There's a presumption, somewhat even still, that our government wouldn't tell us that some bad guy dictator's going to nuke us just as a fake excuse and a cynical lie to start a war, if that's not true. Come on. Yeah? Think of how crazy it would be if you believed in your president and your idiot cab driver said he was a liar, why would you believe your idiot cab driver over the President of the United States of America, man? It's because, yeah, no, sorry, that's the world we live in. They lie. They lie about everything. They lie about the worst things. Another major lie, it's a pretext for war, you've heard this one a million times. Oh, everybody just knows this is true. Iran is the world's greatest state sponsor of terrorism. And let's go ahead and concede that they mean sub-state groups. They don't just mean a national government that uses terror as a policy, because then you have to point your finger at England or America or Israel or others like that. They don't mean that. They mean sub-state groups that use terrorist attacks against civilians and all that. But who are the biggest state sponsors of terrorism in the world? The United States, Britain, and Saudi Arabia. We back the Bin Ladenites. Now sometimes they attack us, but we still back them anyway. And there was a period of time after September 11th, and then especially during Iraq War II, when America fought against Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the Sunni insurgency. And Obama had his drone wars in Yemen and in Pakistan. But then again, turned around and backed him in Libya and in Syria, helped him build the caliphate before he bombed that again. And Joe Biden helped Al-Qaeda take over Syria finally in December of 2024. Donald Trump brought the leader to the White House and sprayed him with perfume and told him how handsome he was. No shit, like really he did. The guy's name, they call him Al-Shara now. He was Abu Muhammad al-Jilani. He was part of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and bragged to American government media, PBS Frontline, that he killed American soldiers, or fought at least, American soldiers in Iraq and in Mosul and Ramadi in Iraq War II. And America's on his side. Why? Because he hates Hezbollah. That's who Iran backs. That's what they mean when they say Iran is the greatest state sponsor of terrorism. They mean Iran backs Hezbollah, an anti-Israeli Shiite militia in southern Lebanon. That is not at war with the United States. That has not attacked American civilians. That played no role whatsoever in the attack on our towers and our Pentagon, or any of the Bin Ladenite attacks of the 1990s, or ever since. They're Israel's enemy. And they have used terrorist tactics in the past. I believe their last suicide bombing was in 1999. But they fire rockets at civilians and whatever. I'm not here to apologize for their tactics. But they're not just a terrorist group. I mean, they're a mini state. And they're the direct result of Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, when the Shiites actually welcomed the Israelis to come and get rid of the PLO for them. So they hated Yasser Arafat. But then the Israelis, of course, stayed, and with their heavy hand, mistreated the Shiites so poorly that they created the Party of God, and as a blowback from their invasion. That's where it comes from in the first place. And they're just not our enemy. So that's why they call them the world's greatest state sponsors of terrorism instead of the world's greatest state sponsors of Al-Qaeda or ISIS, because those are America's enemies. Those are the ones who kill American civilians. And you know who else they kill? Iranians. You might even remember a couple years ago, it made the news. ISIS did a suicide attack at the Ayatollah Khomeini's grave in Tehran, or a shrine to him, or whatever. It was the Iranians who came to help Assad fight off Al-Qaeda when Obama was backing Al-Qaeda against him in Syria 15 years ago. So what we have here then is Israel's enemies, the Shiites, in Hezbollah, backed by the Alawites in Syria and the Shiites in Iran, being supplanted as the American people's enemies in the place of the Bin Ladenites, who actually shed American civilian and military blood. And we're supposed to call them moderate rebels and consider them heroes as long as they're killing Israel's enemies, the Shiites. And they want you to say, just like George W. Bush, what's all this Sunni Shiite shit? I thought they were all Muslims. Yeah, that's because they don't want you to be able to differentiate between who's who here. Because if you can't, we're joking on the way here. There's a story from 2005 where a journalist asked the deputy director of the FBI's counterterrorism division, what's the difference between Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda? And the guy said, I don't know. He's the deputy director of the FBI's counterterrorism division. The same journalist asked Sylvester Reyes, who was at that time the Democratic chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the chair, of the House Intelligence Committee in 2005. Hey, these terrorist groups that we're at war with, what's their name? Where do they live? What's their deal? Can you tell me anything about them at all? They know nothing. You're supposed to just confuse all these issues. Confuse Israel's enemies with America's enemies. And even take America's enemy's side against Israel's enemies. Now here's a huge one too, is, I want to do that one first, yeah. Beirut, 1983, either actual Hezbollah or maybe like proto-Hezbollah type group, associated Shiite terrorists, suicide bombed the barracks of the U.S. Marines and killed 241 Marines, and they also hit the French at a nearby station at the same time. It was at the Beirut airport. And it was a total catastrophe. Reagan pulled the rest of them out of there after it, said he should have never done that in the first place. He wrote in his diary later that, I said I never cut and run, but man, I should have never gone there in the first place. There's no way I was going to double down on that mistake, and I'm so glad I got out of there and all that. Now, the fact of the matter is that it's possible, although I don't know, that Iran had those guys do that, or helped them to do that. I don't think there's any question that it was an Iran-supported group that did it. But, if the shoe's on the other foot, they go, well, don't you deny the agency of these other people doing whatever they want. Just because the CIA gives a truck bomber a bunch of money, don't deny the agency of that truck bomber. Well, same thing with the Iranians give a truck bomber a bunch of money then, right? Is that not how that works? But so, yeah, fine, it was, blame the Ayatollah Khomeini, I don't know, maybe he did it. But that was in 1983, and Ronald Reagan sold the missiles a couple of years after that. So, in other words, this is business, okay? Don't give me a bunch of crocodile tears about something that happened the same year Return of the Jedi came out, the year Dave Smith was born. That's not a cause for America to go to war now. That's not even a cause for America to refuse to have an open, diplomatic, normalized relationship with Iran, like in general now. That's a horrible thing that they did. Damn them for that. But give me a break, man. I was in 3rd grade. It's insane. It's deliberate. It's an excuse. It's not insane. It's a pretended excuse to keep relations frozen. Okay? If they wanted to say, hey, it's very important that we do this despite all bad things that have happened, then they just do that. As Ron Paul said, Kennedy went over there and shook hands with Nikita Khrushchev. Khrushchev. The guy that did the Holodomor for Stalin. That guy. And Kennedy said, hey, business is business. Put it there, pal. Richard Nixon went and shook hands with Mao Zedong, the most violent person who ever lived. And said, hey, what are you going to do? Keep a Cold War going when you can warm it up? Business is business, man. Don't give me 1983 Beirut bombing. That's a cynical, hollow excuse. It's a terrible thing that happened, but it's no excuse for, certainly not for war, but not even for continuing to have negative relations. Those bygones can be bygones. And hell, in 1989, America shot down an Iranian civilian airliner over the Persian Gulf, killed 268 people, I think it was. And George H.W. Bush said, we'll never apologize for that. I don't care what the facts are. Civilian airliner. And I think it was a mistake. Their hotheads thought it was an incoming F-14, because, Iran was flying F-14s around. That's the joke. When America supported Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War for 8 years, America was supporting Saddam Hussein's Soviet military, T-72 tanks and all, against the Ayatollah's American military, with American tanks and American F-4s and F-14s. It's history funny like that. It's like a Bill Hicks joke in real life. I guess that's where he got the jokes from. Okay, and then the 30K. This is really important. A lot of people believe this. I don't know why. It seems so completely stupid to me. But they say that in January, the Ayatollah's regime killed 30,000, sometimes 45, 50, 60, 70, even 80,000 people. As Caitlin Johnstone pointed out, the reason the number keeps changing is because they're lying. They're just making it up. It's so stupid. It took the Israelis 2 years of relentless slaughter to kill 70,000 Palestinians in Gaza, where they were deliberately targeting civilians in crowds, deliberately collapsing apartment buildings on people, bombing tent villages of refugees. But the Ayatollah killed 70,000 people in 2 days with a magic wish, I guess. Somehow he did a Dresden-level firebombing of the capital city of his own country, but nobody documented that. They go, how can you deny that he killed 30,000 people? Look, here's a picture of 12 body bags. Now, even according to the CIA sock puppets, I love this, Human Rights Group in Iran is the name of the thing. Am I in a movie right now? Human Rights Group in Iran, based in Virginia. They report to the Wall Street Journal that 6,000 were killed. So call it 4. All right. And then what does that mean? Well, Donald Trump, now that we're in the future, and it's not January anymore, Donald Trump admitted last week that those were Israeli and American armed Kurdish communists who were trying to overthrow the government in a violent armed insurrection. They were setting mosques on fire, attacking police stations, and yes, mixing themselves in with protesters and other rioters. And so people were killed, including cops. Just like any state government in the world would do. Just like the national government of the United States would do. I mean, if they're not trying to encourage riots for political reasons. But if they wanted to end one, they'd crush it. What would Barack Obama do? People are, armed groups are taking over and burning government buildings in downtown Washington, D.C. He would send in armed men to kill them and or make them stop somehow, like with the threat of killing them. And that would be it. Same as any other state. Now, here's the thing about that. First of all, the Kurdish communists could never be the regime. Does anyone think that they could actually achieve like sacking Tehran and taking it over and suborning the military and police forces under their control? The project for a free life in Kurdistan? Give me a break. If anything, they push every other faction in the country into the arms of the capital by doing that. Here's the other thing. And again, Donald Trump admitted that was the case. That was where they got left. Then here's the other thing about it. And I'm not even sure if this was the purpose. I think maybe this is like just incidental, but maybe it was the purpose. But it's definitely built into the propaganda, right? They didn't even necessarily, the reason I say I don't think this was deliberate is because I never heard them saying this very much. It seemed more implicit to me that what happened was the Ayatollah had to kill 40,000 people in order to get the, apparently what, other few 100,000 to quit and go home. See, so in other words, in lie, the regime was facing a massive popular revolution like 1979 or greater. And only through this Dresden-style, Gaza-style Holocaust was he able to, that he somehow accomplished in 2 days, was he able to somehow put the insurrection down. And what that proves is that the regime in Tehran has zero popular support, that they hang on to power only through the barrel of a gun. And in fact, I saw a clip where Joe Kent, who was the head of the Counterterrorism Center and resigned over the war, was interviewed on Newsmax. Newsmax being, Boomer, Fox News, even to the right of Fox News, pro-war, Ted Cruz slop. And the guy interviewing, Joe Kent says to the guy, he goes, listen, when you bomb a country, you drive people into the arms of the regime. It's called the rally around the flag effect. That's what they call it at college. You know, it's what happened to us. We gave George W. Bush a 90% approval rating after the greatest failure of any president in American history. Why? Because it wasn't about him. It was about F you. The whole world, no, it's us versus y'all, and we are all together, united, we stand against any foreign enemy. That was what it was. It wasn't about him. It was telling the world, don't you mess with us. We're all one thing compared to whatever else you people are wherever you're from. It's the same thing happens anywhere you do this. Anyway, so Joe Kent explains that to Newsmax guy. And then Newsmax guy says, nuh-uh, not in this case. Because we know the Ayatollah had to kill 70,000 people, or whatever the number is now, in order to barely cling on to power in January. And that proves that he has no popular support whatsoever. And the thing is about that is that's totally wrong. But if that was what Donald Trump believed, and that was the narrative on Fox News, and that was the narrative going around the White House, that, wow, I guess Netanyahu is right. He says that the regime there is brittle, that it stands only through violent force, has no popular support at all. All we got to do is hit them and they'll fall. And so they believed it. And I think to a great degree, I think that really informed the policy. That see the Ayatollah just barely clinging on to power by his fingernails. Well, that's totally not true. It's totally not true. And in fact, what we saw immediately after the war, and they did play this on TV, right? Some people were cheering, the Ayatollah's dead, hooray, hooray. Well, if somebody bombed Donald Trump, there are liberals in big cities in America who would cheer. Okay? That doesn't mean they represent the population of the country. And what we saw in Tehran was within days, they had assembled hundreds of thousands of people in giant pro-regime protests and pledging their support for the regime and proving that they weren't going anywhere. There's hundreds of thousands of people. They tried to deny it and say these are AI photos, but then the New York Times photographer who took the pictures was like, no, my name is Ahmed and I took those goddamn pictures and they're real, so sorry. And it was funny because even Grok was saying they were fake, and then Glenn Greenwald's arguing with Grok. Shut up, Grok, you don't know anything, you're a stupid chatbot. And the EFPs, they say this all the time. I know you guys heard this 100 times. Iran killed 600 of our guys in Iraq War II. Well, first of all, the number's 500, but second of all, it wasn't Iran that killed them. They died fighting Iraqi Shiites. Shiite Arab Iraqis, not Persians from Iran, Arab Iraqis from Iraq. And they only were fighting them because America attacked them. You might remember in the war, America fought that whole war for the Shiites, for the Skiri, for the Dawa Party, and the Mahdi army. And the Iranians and the Ayatollah Khamenei and his government in Tehran, as well as the Ayatollah Sistani down in Najaf, who was the highest ranking Shiite cleric, all instructed the Shiite parties to cooperate with the United States. This war is for us against our enemies, the Sunni kings, the Sunni sheikhs. We're kicking them out and we're taking power. Cooperate with Bush. He's our guy now. And really, well, I don't want to get too far into it, but that was what happened. That was how that whole war was fought. So why were any Shiites killing American soldiers in Iraq War II? Because America turned around and attacked one of the major Shiite faction leaders, Muqtada al-Sadr and his Mahdi army. But the reason they hated him wasn't because he was the one who was closest to Iran and because Iran was telling him to attack us. That's not what it was. It was because he was the most nationalist of the Iraqi Shiite leaders. He wanted to work with the Sunnis, and he wanted to limit Iranian but also American influence. So the Americans preferred the Shiite leaders who were closer to Iran because they would let us stay too, compared to the Iraqi nationalist Shiites under Muqtada al-Sadr who wanted us to leave. So then they attacked him. And they lied and said that the reason they were attacking him was because Iran is having him attack us. And then they tried to use that as a pretext to get W. Bush to attack Iran in 2007, which, as I said earlier, he thankfully declined to do. But this was the big pressure campaign in the spring of 2007. And if they know what they're talking about at all, they'll call them the EFPs. It means explosively formed penetrator. And that is an improvement on the regular IEDs, that is improvised explosive devices, that the Sunni insurgency that killed 4,000 of the 4,500 Americans who died in that thing. The primary enemy in that war. They just had IEDs that were basically usually just made out of old artillery shells and whatever they could find and make homemade landmines out of. But the Shiites had these new and improved, better IEDs called EFPs. And what it was is a shaped charge with a copper disc. And what happens is the explosion folds that disc and turns it molten, and it just cuts right through armor. And they were invented in World War II, and it turns out that the Iraqi Shiites didn't get the technology from Iran. They got it from Lebanese Hezbollah, but they didn't get it from Iran either. They got it from the IRA. And so it was just a hoax. And they just lied. And they said it a million times, and see, I debunked this all in real time at the time in 2007. That they would just lie and say every time an EFP bomb went off in Shiite territory, every time an Iraqi Shiite killed an American soldier, they would say Iran did it. And they wouldn't even say, sometimes they'd say Iran gave them the bomb, but a lot of times they'd just skip that and say Iran did it. As though Iran had fielded a giant army into the country and they were the ones attacking our soldiers. When it was Muqtada al-Sadr, again, the most nationalist of the Shiites. And then ironically, of course, they chased Sadr into Iran, where he became closer to the regime and got a higher religious rank. So, a little self-inflicted wound there. But that whole thing was really just a conspiracy between David Petraeus, Dick Cheney, and Michael Gordon of the New York Times to try to bait us into that war. It was a giant propaganda campaign. And I cite guys who were absolutely in authoritative positions to know in my book Enough Already, who were officers, intelligence officers at that time, who told me that I'm 100% right about that, and they know it for a fact from their job working at that time in there. And so, geez, am I out of fake pretexts for war that they use to lie us into the thing? Now look at how terrible the war has been. Donald Trump has just essentially blown America's entire bluff to the world. I mean, the headline today is that it's now in question of whether America can defend Taiwan. Well, look, it already was in question of whether America can defend Taiwan. Big time. But what they really mean by that is the Taiwanese are questioning that more and more. In fact, the leader went over there, the president of Taiwan went to Beijing to start reunification talks. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's like right out of the comic. Like, geez, within 2 weeks of the war, 3 weeks of the war, oh boy, America ain't coming for us. And they went right over there and started talking. I wish them luck. In South Korea, they said, hey, Israel's getting shot at. Sorry, we need your THAAD interceptors. And they took them from South Korea, gave them to Israel, and then Iran bombed them and destroyed them. So if you're South Korea, you're going, dude, we don't even want those back. In fact, America had to really twist the South Koreans' arm, and it really pissed the Chinese off when they accepted those missiles in the first place. And the Chinese that raised all these tariffs kicked the South Koreans out of their car market and all kinds of other things. There's all kinds of repercussions from them even allowing those missiles in the first place. And we go, oh, sorry, psych, we need it for something else, and then waste them. They're lost anyway. If you're South Korea, you're like, you want those missiles back? When all they did was ratchet up tension with China, which apparently, hell, if Iran can overwhelm those radars and defense systems, then China surely can. So what good are they to you anyway, South Korea? The Japanese got to be asking the same question. America can threaten H-bomb war. Nobody doubts that. We can put one hell of a hot bit of firepower on target over your city if we have to. But defend your country with our conventional power? Maybe not so much. We gave all the best of what we had to the Ukrainians. They made the best of what they could with it, and they fight like dogs, and they're still losing. And Iran has destroyed 13 military bases. You guys have all seen that map, right? You've seen the famous meme, it even goes back on Facebook days, right? Oh yeah, well if Iran isn't a threat to America, how come they put their country so close to all our military bases? And then it has all those marks, all those military bases around Iran, right? Well, you got to redo that map now. All those bases are gone. They destroyed 13 American military bases from Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan. They destroyed the Air Force and Army bases in Kuwait. They touched the Air Force base in Qatar, but then they cut a deal with Qatar. They said, tell you what, if you refuse to let the Americans fly out of their Central Command headquarters, U.S. Air Force Base, premier Air Force base in the region for missions against us, then we won't bomb you anymore. And Qatar said, okay, America, you're not forbidden from using your military base in our country. And so that's how they got a free pass. But the naval base, the 5th Fleet base at Bahrain, destroyed. They at least hit the radars and planes sitting on the runways in Saudi Arabia and in UAE and Oman. And then they've reached out and hit at least billions, if not trillions already, no, hundreds of billions of economic targets up and down the Gulf. They've hit chemical refineries, oil refineries, ports and docks and 5-star hotels, and which you had American officers using human shields hiding in 5-star hotels running the war. In Dubai and other places, the Iranians hit them with drones. They say all those tourist towns are ghost towns now. Everybody's gone. They have routinely threatened their desalinization plants, which they could just drive the entire population of the other side of that Gulf right out of there. In Persia, they got water. In Arabia, not so much. They need plants to produce potable water for them. So they called America's bluff. It's really since 1945 when Franklin Roosevelt declared American supremacy in the Persian Gulf and our alliance with Saudi Arabia. And then in 1980, Jimmy Carter, I'm sure there's various stages I'm skipping too, but Jimmy Carter in 1980 declared the Carter Doctrine, where he said, the Persian Gulf is an American lake. If the Soviet Union invades Persia, invades Iran to try to control the Gulf, we will consider it an attack on the United States of America, and we will go to nuclear war. Right, this is revolutionary Iran that we hate. We're still giving them a war guarantee that the Soviets better not take it, because we're not going to let them control that Gulf. We're not going to let anybody control that Gulf but us. That's over. That's gone. As Justin Logan from Cato said, what good's a military base that you can't fight a war from? We had to evacuate all of our guys, and then they hit all of our best radars for our entire web of anti-missile tech. That's why they have to fire more and more defensive missiles at each one, because they got fewer and fewer overlapping radars helping track the income. So it was one of the reasons they had to call the ceasefire. Now, I don't know how they can ever go back again. The bluff on American military, conventional military power has been called. Even if we had to fight, this was the one that is supposed to be the no-brainer. We had to fight Russia with NATO in Eastern Europe. I think now the entire presumption that we kick their ass is canceled. We have the air power. We have a real air power advantage over them. If it was like a full-scale conventional war with Russia, I'm not sure how much difference it would make, but we would definitely have an air power advantage over them. But in terms of battle-hardened experience and fighting with drones and fighting on the ground with armor and in trenches and, that kind of war, I don't know that America has the advantage at all. Never mind the fact that we got to transport all our stuff somehow all the way across Germany to get to the Baltics or anything like that anyway. So, in a lowercase sense, I don't mean it like that, but just it is a new world order now. The entire question of America's conventional military dominance has been called. If Iran can fight us to a standstill, denies every single one of our goals, right? No enrichment, an end of support for their proxy groups in the region, an end of their missile program, a regime change of any kind. All that out the window. None of that. They're settling for, geez, can we leave with the straight looking like it's still open basically, and that it doesn't look too bad for us, is what we're trying to settle for now. And not getting it for various reasons. Now look, if we had a parliamentary system, we could just call no confidence in Trump, and we could just put somebody else up there whose fault this isn't and tell him to end it. Right? But the problem is, we're stuck with this guy for 3 years. And he's the one who did it. So he's the one who looks bad if things don't go right. And that counts for everything, right? As libertarians, we understand public choice theory. That means that when government employees become government employees, they don't stop being people and start being angels. And they don't start being selfless statesmen. In fact, it's usually the most arrogant and regarding types who get those positions in the first place. So ending the war has to be good for Trump. It has to look good for him. He has to be able to call it a win. We got to be able to give him a big gold shiny medal and throw a ticker tape parade for him and tell him that he did something good so that he can come home. Otherwise, he can't. Because it's all about how it looks for him and for his political fortunes. Now, obviously, the major unsaid specter behind all of this, the unanswered, the answer to the unasked question behind it all, is Israel. That's where this policy comes from. America could have normalized relations with Iran back, I don't know, when Israel broke their friendly relations with Iran in the early 1990s. Israel stayed friends with Iran after the Iranian Revolution. When Ronald Reagan sold Iran missiles, he used the Israelis as cutouts to do it because the Israelis were already selling them weapons. The Israelis didn't turn against Iran until 1993. But 1993 was right when America could have turned back toward Iran and normalized relations. In fact, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who had been Jimmy Carter's national security advisor and had egg all over his face from the hostage crisis and all of that, was, responsible in many ways for it. By 1993, he said, "Dad, forget that. It's water under the bridge, man. This is business. Beirut, who cares? Let's do business." In fact, he was more interested in screwing the Russians. He wanted to stick a straw in the Caspian Basin and pump that oil south through Tehran, or through Iran, to the Persian Gulf. And then you know who agreed with him? Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State, Alexander Haig. Said, yeah, that's what we should do, is we should make friends with Iran. Bring them in from the cold. The revolution was a long time ago. Let's make money. And you know who agreed with Alexander Haig and Zbigniew Brzezinski? Dick Cheney, the chairman of Halliburton, who repeatedly complained about Bill Clinton's sanctions and said this is no way to do business. We should be able to build pipelines, that's Halliburton's business, build pipelines from the Caspian through Iran to the Persian Gulf. That way to better screw the Russians. And it was the Israelis who said no, veto power. And the Israeli lobby kicked into gear and all their apparatchiks in Washington and forbid it and said we have to freeze out Russia and Iran. And that's the origin of what's the famous BTC pipeline, the Baku-Tbilisi giant pipeline that goes from Azerbaijan through Georgia and Turkey to the Mediterranean Sea, due west, to screw the Russians and the Iranians. And it was a project that they began in the Clinton years for exactly that purpose. But there were all kinds of powerful corporations and powerful political men who wanted to go ahead and turn over a new leaf. But the Israelis were the fly in the ointment every time. They always are. And I hate to quote Hillary Clinton favorably in any way or whatever, but she's just obviously telling the truth when she said last week that they have always been trying to get us to do this. They tried to get Bush to do it. They tried to get Obama to do it. I sat there and listened to Netanyahu tell me why we got to bomb Iran, and she said the reason why we always said no was because we didn't have a good end game. We can start a war with Iran, but then what? We don't know what to do. We can't put our army in there, and we cannot control the reality on the ground unless we do. And so that's it. So why start a war you can't win, That was the deal. And as I said, Bush told them no on advice from the Pentagon. Obama went through, the trouble of creating the JCPOA to try to take the nuclear issue off the table as a pretext for war. I actually didn't see this, but Eric Garrison at antiwar.com told me there's a clip going around of one of Obama's men was on Meet the Press or something last Sunday, and they said, yeah, Donald Trump says he's the only one brave enough to do this and that no other president had the courage to do what had to be done. And the Obama official says, no, that's not true. Oh, sorry, the Biden official says that's not true. Biden actually had a plan to attack Iran in 2024. It just, other things came up and delayed it and whatever, it didn't happen. But I swear we're this far away. That's the Democrat story. It's not. That's right. We're way too smart to do something stupid like this. We are too dumb enough to do this. We just didn't quite get the opportunity we were searching for. But yeah, no, it is the lobby. Absolutely behind it. It was the lobby who really were one of the major deciding factors in getting us into Iraq War II. It was the lobby that pushed Obama to back Al-Qaeda in Syria that ended up leading to the rise of the Islamic State goddamn caliphate that then required Iraq War III to go back and destroy it again from 2014 through 18. And it was the Israelis who pushed Trump into this. And really, you know, from the Israelis' point of view, you could look at this as, it's supposed to be like their masterstroke of the Netanyahu doctrine, which says, you know, as the Republicans like to say, peace through strength, which means total dominance over the neighbors, means they wouldn't dare resist, they have to do whatever you say. That's their policy. Their problem has been, that they got to deal with Hezbollah on their northern flank, who don't mind dying at least that much, and have a bunch of missiles they got from Iran. They had to deal with the Assad regime in Damascus, both backed by Iran. And now the Houthis down in Yemen as well. And their problem is they want to steal all of Palestine. But the problem is every time that they make major moves against the Palestinians, Hezbollah starts firing sympathy rockets from the north to divert and distract. So this is part of the clean break doctrine, is Israel, you know, according to the American neoconservatives and the Likud, that in order to steal Palestine, they got to nullify Hezbollah's power by getting rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, which is idiocy and thinking, and only empower Iran more. But then, okay, fine, they're getting rid of Assad in Syria, which they did, as I said, in the end of 2024. So, you know, like a year into the Gaza war, they got rid of Assad. So in the Gaza war, you can call it that, the slaughter of those poor people, they severely set back Hamas. They didn't really obliterate them or completely destroy them, but they did severely weaken them. And they thought, at least, that they had weakened Hezbollah, although it turns out maybe not as much as they thought, but they did kill their charismatic leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and they did the Patriot attack, which wiped out kind of middle management of the group, and they bombed the crap out of them, bombed their missile stores and all of that for quite a while. So at least they thought that they had made a lot better progress against Hezbollah than they really did, but they did make some. And then the Iraqi Shiite militias, as close as they are to Iran, they never seem to really intervene on Iran's side that much. You get some pot shots that they fire off at our guys in Iraq and sometimes over the line into Syria over the years. And a few guys were killed even, but for the most part, the Iraqi militias stay out of it, and they certainly haven't done anything really against Israel. So the Israelis are kind of ignoring them. But then this is from the point of view of the Likud and from the neoconservatives, Tehran is the prize. This is everything. This is, you know, as Michael Ledeen used to write in the National Review, faster please, we have to go after the terror masters in Tehran. Again, the leaders of Israel's enemies. And so, from Netanyahu's point of view, if he could take out the Ayatollah's regime and like parachute the monarch in there, the Shah Reza Pahlavi's grandson, really, they say the son, but he's really the grandson. If they could get an easy Israeli-friendly regime, or if they could even just really break the state up and cause a civil war there that really weakens the entire state, takes it off the board, then that would be to the increase of Israel's power, at least in the short term, to their power and influence in the region. And so Netanyahu has pushed and pushed for this. Now, to me, it seems actually kind of counterproductive even from Likud's point of view, because what they had been working on was essentially with the Abraham Accords, was bribing the Sunni kings into forsaking the Palestinians, normalizing relations with Israel without the Israelis giving the Palestinians citizenship in one state or a two-state solution in independence, which the Sunni kings had always promised never to do. But Jared Kushner in the first Trump term said, well, what's your price? And just started passing out bribes. And so we got Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, and Sudan to normalize relations, and they were working on Saudi Arabia. And, but see, the whole reason for those Sunni kings to want to get along with Israel, I thought, and at the time this is how they sold it, was join us in a group to protect against Iran, the great Shiite menace across the Gulf there. And so that's why UAE, Bahrain, Saudi, why you want to be friends with Israel, is because, for one, we got access to the United States. We can arm you up, and we can all be in a group together to fend off Iranian influence. So I guess that was just like plan B, when plan A really was, yeah, but if we can go ahead and kill the Ayatollah, we prefer to do that. And then, you know, it's hard to tell with the Israelis, you know, the stupid versus evil quotient, because, you know, somebody could be a premeditated murder, but also not have a very good plan for how to get away, or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of like wishful thinking on the part of the Israelis. All that propaganda about, if we just hit them, they'll fall. If we just kill the Ayatollah, the whole government will unravel. Trust me, dog, it'll be fine. I think they really believe their own, I mean, obviously they wanted Trump to believe that. I think there's probably a lot of wishful thinking even on the part of Netanyahu. At least that, even if he didn't think he could, you know, parachute the monarch in there, then like, well, I bet we could cause a civil war. I bet we could arm up Kurdish communists and bin Ladenite suicide bombers and whoever we need to enough to at least tear the country apart if we can't, you know, get a sock puppet in there to rule it. Because otherwise, how do you explain this? I mean, I was joking the other day, they're like, oh man, I think we figured it out, right? Netanyahu is an Iranian spy, he always has been. That was why he convinced America to get rid of Saddam Hussein for them. And that was why he convinced, you know, Barack Obama to make Assad more dependent on Iran than ever before. And that's why he's now convinced Donald Trump to get Iran to declare ownership over the entire Persian Gulf and never give it up again. Either that or he's just really bad at being a prime minister. Here's another thing I want to say about Israel and their problems that they cause for us. And that is the bin Ladenites. Now, I already mentioned about how America, Britain, and Saudi backed the bin Ladenites. Traditionally, you know, starting really in Afghanistan, or maybe even before that, but in Afghanistan, and then in Bosnia, Kosovo, Chechnya, and even in the Xinjiang province in China, in the lead up to the September 11th attacks. Even though Al-Qaeda was attacking us all through the 1990s, America was still backing them, as long as they're killing Serbs, Russians, and Shiites, and Chinese, Han, commies, and whoever for us. So, but the thing of it was, they had already turned on us. And their first attack in America, you know, what we call Al-Qaeda was basically a merger between this group of Saudis, mostly, called the Azam Group. It was led by a Palestinian, but, and then Egyptian Islamic Jihad. And those groups kind of merged together. So what you'd call like kind of proto-Al-Qaeda, which is basically Egyptian Islamic Jihad guys in America. They did these first bin Ladenite attacks against us in the 1990s. They assassinated Rabbi Kahane in 1990 in New York City. They did a hotel bombing in Yemen in 92, the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, well, whatever, a bunch of attacks all through the 1990s. And anyway, one of the main, okay, first of all, they had a strategy. They were trying to provoke us into overreacting. They were trying to scare us away. They were trying to get us to invade Afghanistan so they could replicate the war that we helped them wage against the Soviet Union. The Afghans as expendable extras in their movie, but that was the plan. So that was what it was. That was the strategy. But the motive for them attacking us, I thought this was crucial. As the former CIA chief, CIA Bin Laden unit chief, Michael Scheuer, pointed out, that various Muslim leaders have denounced American society over the years, R-rated movies and whatever, this kind of stuff. Nobody cares about that. But what Bin Laden did, even if you think that he was just Lex Luthor, who, like the total cynical criminal who didn't believe anything at all, it doesn't, which, whatever, he's a mass murderer, so like, yeah, fine. You don't have to take his word for anything. That's the point is, though, what did he tell other people to get them to do what he wanted them to do? And what he would tell them is that America is pursuing these specific foreign policies to the detriment of our people. And first on the list was occupying bases in Saudi Arabia in order to bomb and blockade Iraq. Well, that was part of an Israeli insisted upon policy called dual containment that was born in Tel Aviv. And it was Bill Clinton's advisor, Martin Indyk, who had worked for Yitzhak Shamir, came and insisted on the policy. Said instead of helping Iraq and Iran balance against each other or balancing against them from carriers in the Gulf or something, America has to stay in Saudi Arabia to bomb and blockade Iraq and to enforce our sanctions and to balance against Iran in the Gulf. Yeah. Well, that was the #1 reason Al-Qaeda turned against the United States. And why were we there? To bomb and blockade Iraq, the #2 reason on the list. Because they're tearing people apart with high explosives, first of all, and then they're starving the rest and causing hundreds of thousands of deaths, of otherwise preventable deaths of children, excess deaths. Then, third on the list is support for the Israelis and their cruelty against the Palestinians and the Lebanese. And a great example of this is that in 1996, the Prime Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, invaded southern Lebanon again. And get this, it was Naftali Bennett, the past and almost certainly future Prime Minister of Israel. He was the artillery officer who called in a strike on a UN shelter and killed 106 women and children. And then bin Laden complained about that in his first declaration of war against the United States in 1996. It's right there on the front page of it. Is we'll never forget the severed heads and arms and legs of the babies and the children in Qana. And this inspired Mohammed Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh, the lead hijacker of September 11th and one of the lead coordinators of the September 11th attack, who's in Guantanamo to this day, to join Al-Qaeda, to sacrifice their lives to kill some of us. So here we have Egyptian engineering students studying in Hamburg, Germany, volunteering for a Saudi sheikh hiding in Afghanistan to volunteer to kill Americans as revenge for what Israel's doing in Lebanon. That we pay for. Now, our government provides diplomatic cover in the United Nations for, and all the rest of it. That's where they get the weapons, that's where they get the impunity, is from us. And so then our people are crucified for their sins. And then, when September 11th happens, they go, you know what you got to do? You got to go to Iraq. You got to go to Iran. You got to go to Libya. You got to go to Syria. You got to fight all our enemies for us. Even to the benefit of the bin Laden head choppers, suicide bombers. As long as they're fighting the guys that we hate the most. That's why they always do this stuff about, oh, radical Islam. Well, why can't they just talk about who they're talking about? All these groups have names. It's because they have to conflate so they can bait and switch. That's it. Okay, now, to wrap up, the national debt's $40 trillion. $40 trillion. So, we can just quit now. The interest on the debt, that we got to borrow money to pay interest on the debt, that interest on the debt now costs more than the world empire. The world empire, I mean, the real budget is $1.7 trillion. The official one, they're now raising it to 1.5, so I don't know what the real one is. The official military budget is $1.5 trillion a year. Interest on the debt, 1.7. Almost 2. Okay, so your empire has blown its brains out now. It's already over. These are the death throes. There's no point in keeping up this charade. Iran just called our bluff with medium-range ballistic missiles. Turns out we can't fight them. Turns out we can't fight anybody. And we can't afford it anyway. So with any hope of saving this country at all, we should just stop this immediately. In fact, how about we take every cent of that military budget and put all of that to paying down that debt. Or let's just repudiate the debt and give that money back to the people in the form of tax rebates. But look, and I know everybody says the same thing. Everybody's dad in this room says the same thing. Oh yeah, but then Russia or China will take over. Nuh-uh. They can't afford it either, man. Can you imagine Xi Jinping looking at George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and going, yeah, man, that's what I want for my country. This is what I want for my legacy. I'm gonna be the guy who blew China's brains out, trying to conquer Eurasia. Check a map. China's already a massive overextended empire. They're not trying to bite off Central Asia, and they're not trying to conquer Japan. Get the hell out of here. Even if they do take Taiwan, that still doesn't mean they're coming for Tokyo, dude. It just doesn't. It's silly. And much less, look, we all know they want to build what they call the Belt and Road Initiative, which is like a railway, a highway, and fiber optic and electricity from Shanghai to Lisbon. And they're going to do that by killing people the whole way there, by building a violent world empire, and picking a fight with every Muslim radical in Tajikistan on the way. Forget it, dude. Makes no sense. It's like, just like Bill Hicks said this back in 1992, man, just spin the globe, just look. There's no one out there, man. It's a dangerous world, Bill. No, it's not. Look. Seriously, we're friends with every single power in Europe, including the Russians. Vladimir Putin still calls America our American partners on everything. We still launch American astronauts on Russian rockets firing Ukrainian engines to the International Space Station on a regular basis, okay? That's our worst enemy in Europe, our friends the Russians, conservative Christian Russia, okay? Then, in Africa, let's see, there are no powers. The only country in Africa that matters is Egypt. They're completely pwned by the United States of America. Then you have the Gulf. Even bin Laden himself said, what am I going to do with the oil? Drink it? In other words, seriously, he had a great sense of humor, that bin Laden. No, at least that one time. He said that to Abdel Bari Atwan. In other words, no matter who rules the Gulf, it's going to be for sale. Because that's what oil is for. Selling and turning into money, so you can turn that money into other stuff that you want. That's the whole purpose of pumping oil out of the ground, dude. Give me a break. It's going to be open for business no matter what. India, they have atom bombs and potentially the ability to deliver them, but they have no economic force and no other conventional military might or ability to project power in any way. They're not building any world-class navy or anything like it. Right? Their entire national security interest is, you know, trying to maintain control of Kashmir and not get into a nuclear war over it with Pakistan, right? And keeping the Chinese out of this, fighting over a border in the Himalayas. And then you got China. They've been our friends since Mao was still alive in the 1970s. For 17 years before the Soviet Union fell apart, we've been getting along with them. And they're more capitalist now than ever before, so the whole ideology, the threat of the spread of ideological communism from them is completely kaput. As absolutely not an issue. And so they can be a tyranny in their own country all they want. That doesn't make them an aggressive threat against us. And then that's it. Latin America, we got Brazil. That's the biggest economic weight in Latin America. But does anybody think that they're building a military to even fight Argentina, much less the United States of America, or try to tell us what to do? That's it. Keep spinning the globe. Now you need the lost continent of Atlantis to come back, so you can pretend to have an enemy out there somewhere. Because all the powers of the earth are actually tame at this point. They want to pretend that it's somehow, if America wasn't there to hold the world together, it would be the return of the totalitarians. But come on, man, the era of fascism and communism are over. It's not like that. At least, you know, obviously you can have very political economic systems in a lowercase f fascist sense. But I mean, the cult of the Führer principle and all of that crap, give me a break, dude. All that's gone. So there's just no need. As Ron Paul said, we just come home. Now, there were better times to just come home than this week. Okay? We could have just come home a year ago. It would have looked a lot better. Okay? But at the same time, there's no need to try to tie up loose ends, get everything set. We're going to set the table just right. We're going to have the world just perfect and then leave. Because, look, again, public choice theory, right? It's not in anybody's interest to do that. Can you imagine a situation where America sits down, we have a big conference, and we make sure that all the powers of Asia are all on the same page, and then we slowly back away? Nah, you just gotta quit it. You just gotta quit it. Leave it up to them. They can work it out. The Japanese and the South Koreans are gonna go back to war? Nah. No, they're not, dude. Be fine. And so that's it. We can do like Ron Paul said, and we can just come home. The era of the fascists is long gone. The era of the communists is long gone now. And so there really is no danger out there to fight other than the terrorists that are generated by our interventionist foreign policy in the first place. And so, you know, and I'm not saying give in to them. I'm saying it's the right thing to stop doing the wrong thing, and then you don't have to worry about the consequences. So you can just quit it. And with that, please buy my books after the thing. Thank you.
All right, guys, one more round of applause for Scott. You guys forgot, the beer is that way. I'll see you guys later.
Okay, the beer is foamy, so be gentle.
Don't pump it. Don't pump it. Until it stops foaming and stops flowing, then you pump it.
We don't use alcohol around here.
You are on beer duty.
Find someone to give this. Chris asked. Because he's probably. Chris